Crepon, who work together in the studio Inside Outside based in Amsterdam. And we are now a presentation of a lecture by them, and then there will be a moment for the presentation of this book recently published by the publisher MAC, based in London. The title to present all the work of the studio is Applied Arts, and I will start, yes, to say that the work of the Inside Outside studio is quite original. It goes much far beyond the world of architecture, maybe also in line with the formative experience of both Petra and Jana. Jana is a landscape architect. Petra worked for several years in the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam with applied arts, by the way, in department, and then moved to an experience of freelance exhibition design before founding Inside Outside in 1991. So there are many disciplines merging or collaborating, or now I hope they are explaining how the interaction of this. What I care about, to underline about their work is the fact that, as for example, the attention in interior, it's not only a work of interior design, it's a work, for example, that uses some devices and some materials very much, let's say, underestimated by architects. Also, the word curtain is very much simplistic to define because they are literally movable walls, a sort of soft architecture, let's say extremely flexible and literally moving. Not moving very often in architecture is a metaphor. It's not the case. Who among you had the possibility to see the Dutch Pavilion of 2014, 10 years ago, in Venice, Biennale, we remember very well, because also there was a sophisticated interaction with lights, with light design and sound also sometimes. I wanted to underline, for example, nowadays in Milan Triennale, it's open the exhibition of Gaia Aulenti, where if you go to watch, who was totally different architect, but as she moved from design of object, then to interior design, then to scenography of theater, it was natural at the end of her life, alone, in a studio, pyramidal studio, to evolve into museography and installation of works of art. Palazzo Grassi, the museum in Paris of the Impressionist, La Gare d'Orsay in Barcelona, etc. In a way, I think, also because of the title of this book, which is almost 900 pages, so that is really a lot of work and a project to show. I have the impression that applied arts was the word that you would use it before the 30s to describe what nowadays we call design, because the word design is used since the 30s, before was not used. In fact, Le Corbusier hated it. He preferred decorative art, which might seem something minor, in fact relegated to women work, the interior, the carpets, curtains, until Gio Ponti, with his work, said, no, this is an extension of architecture, it's really new territory. No, all the territories were to express modernity at the time hasn't done. What I wanted to say finally is that thank beyond Ponti, because there is the movement who create choreographies in a way, with the inside and outside. I have the impression that the original experience in a museum of art, this this relation with art in the end prevail, both inside and outside. And so I invite you for the presentation, and maybe at the end when we are presenting the book, I will do a couple of questions, if you agree.
Okay, well, maybe I'd like to stand. Is that okay? I'm wired. Okay, yeah, inside, outside. There was a title put onto our presentation called Chaos and Order. I would rather say disorder and order, if you don't mind, because chaos is quite a negative thing. It's true that we work on many fields. We're doing exhibition design, landscape architecture, interior design, and curtain design. Curtain in the sense of large-scale curtains for theaters, public buildings. And we work with an interdisciplinary team in Amsterdam, and we're about 12 people, of which 10 are designers, architects, landscape architects, interior designers, and fashion designer. And I'm more from an art background. And so if you think about chaos or disorder and order, indeed, I think with landscape, I can say that we often begin with order, with a certain system, and from that system, something else will derive. So in Seattle also, you see that there is a system of literally almost connecting the landscape, very urban landscape in the city of Seattle, with the interior by introducing these, what we call garden carpets. And these garden carpets, they circle through this library up, and they show the way, and they create places, and they have acoustic qualities, etc. Because all our work has to do with creating light, creating space, but also improving all the conditions like climate and sound and space definition, etc. So already from a long time, our landscape alias interior alias curtains are kind of melting. And so we play a lot with continuation, but also reflection and transparency and translucency, as you see in Chicago. Or we introduce, you don't see the time limit on your screen, that's good. We introduce what Caspar Koenig called a sixth dimension to the landscape here in Villa Manin in 2004 or 5, something like that, where we created personal pavilions with parasols that protected everyone from the sun, but also these polished stainless steel drops that go into the landscape and that show you the way, but also create a new dimension because trees grow down and the sky is under you instead of above. Speaks for itself. And even in tapestries, such as the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, we introduce a kind of nature into this textile, woven, woolen, permanent installation on the wall of between the old and the new Stedelijk Museum buildings you might have visited in Amsterdam. And this tapestry represents or connects the old with the new. So it has many stories. So we work internationally on many kind of collaborations with different architects, quite often with OMA, such as here in the Middle East, to see how a landscape can play a role in a new urban development. So if we talk about order, we can say that we do different landscapes, public parks. We now work on Geneva with a team, but we also made gardens in the Middle East, such in Doha, and a public park in Milan. And they all start quite graphic, and they have a very clear system. And whether that system is about connectivity or it's about introducing local botanic families from the desert, or whether, like in Genova, we introduce a botanic garden, a system of different trees that come from the mountains around, and each line is a different garden. It's always something that starts very graphic and starts very organized, because you must imagine we also communicate on long distance. We are in Amsterdam, and we go to Doha, we go to Milan, we go to Geneva, but of course we have to also, or to Beijing, where we also did gardens for the CCTV, and we have to communicate with the builders from a distance and with the gardeners from a distance. So you always start with a relatively simple recipe. We call it recipe. But in fact, of course, if I'm honest, the recipe is very complex. And so you need to really draw in an architectural manner, but also in a botanic manner and in a systematic manner, what is planted where and who grows what, because a garden like this takes 5 years to make it really feasible to make it, because the plants need to be grown, so that takes a couple of years. But in the end, these systematic organizations do their own thing. Plants seed, they die, they come back again, they disappear, they grow, they overtake. So in fact, what we want and what our aim is that we start very organized, but then it has its own life. And that is actually what we think is interesting in our work. On the one hand, we create textile objects that we install in their most perfect, condition, and that is the perfect situation. And then, if it's textile, it slowly degrades. It dies, actually. A curtain can take 30 years, or 10 years, or 15 years, but it will disappear. It will undo itself. Whereas with landscapes, of course, we design it, we plant it, we seed it, but if it's there, it starts. It's the starting point. And then it takes 50 years or 100 years to really become what you imagine as a landscape designer or architect. So all these things are still pretty organized in Doha, but they will get their own life, and they will grow, and they will, do their own thing. And so we'll disorder the whole thing. Of course, you can also make landscapes in a mineral manner, but the whole point here is, of course, it's under a roof, that it's porous, that it absorbs water, that it has a life of its own underground, maybe invisible, maybe not with plants, but it's still a garden, it's still a landscape, it's still a public space. And the same goes for Milan, the park we call Biblioteca degli Alberi, where we created this system of paths that connect different areas and different buildings and different streets of Milan in a very efficient way, if you follow the path, but you can also, of course, do this. And all these paths create fields, and in these fields there are different garden typologies. So these garden typologies, they might look very graphic, but underground they are all connected, because we, of course, know that roots and all the underground systems are interconnected, and if they're not, you have a problem. So it's better to really create means of earth or soil to connect, and so that plants can connect underground and all their roots and systems. So this was in the beginning, and you see here different typologies, and of course trees that still need to grow for a long time. But you can already see that there are really garden-like situations developing, like the pond, and like some plants, and there are now fish, and there are insects, and there's a lot of life in this water, and it took only 2 years or so. And I was at a certain point walking there, and there was somebody behind me, a couple, and they said, "Oh, I think we should put our turtles in here." So somebody put turtles in it, and the turtles really like it there, so they become more and more. I think they're now in a zoo, but anyway, it gets its own life. And Parco del Ponte is of course, a very political project with Stefano Bueri and Metrogramma, and of course, Laura Gatti as an agronomist. We are a team working on this very industrial area, and the decision of the municipality to make a public park underneath the former Morandi Bridge. Now, of course, Renzo Piano has built a beautiful new one. And so going with the streets and the train tracks and the canal, we designed this principle of linear gardens, old botanical gardens, with new breaking open the mineral, breaking open the asphalt and the concrete, and introducing porous soil so that water can be absorbed and plants can grow. And you can imagine it depends all on maintenance, whether this system will stay or whether in the end we will have a forest-like condition, half urban, half natural, but in any case with living soil and with a porous underground and with lots of different, what we call biodiverse planting schemes. Needless to say, we often work in very harsh conditions, also in Genova, where the soil is this is an analysis of the soil, so you can imagine nothing lives there, nothing grows there, it's a hopeless case. And because of this soil and because of this total lack of understanding of the dynamics of water and weather and wind and climate change and canal building that has no understanding of what water wants to do, these conditions are created a few times a year, if I understand well. And of course, with all that mineral, all the cities get much too hot. And with this hot and heat, we can help by creating conditions with not only trees, not only 1 million trees, but actually conditions with the street and the sidewalk and the roofs and everything to absorb water, to cool the city, and of course also with planting and the necessary. But everything starts with the soil and the ground, is our opinion, and I think we are supported in this. So this sketch really was made for Genova, really illustrates how we think this water management and porosity and living soil should be organized. And of course, many people do a lot of things to green the city. Everyone knows this project. They're quite old by now. But still, we fight animals in the city. We're not collaborating with animal life. We're not collaborating with plant life. We are kind of thinking that it's two different things. Infrastructure and soil, roots and roads, they're all competing. Whereas, of course, we think they shouldn't compete. So in our view, there's a turning point, not only in our view, but as you know, also the European Union says we should have nature-inclusive cities, and we are by now working on almost 6 or 7 projects, and also doing a study whether all our curtains that we've made for since 1986, so that's about 38 years, we're making curtains. And we're doing one study where solar cells are integrated in curtains, but now we're studying whether we can make curtains that are made of a base that absorb moisture. And by absorbing moisture and holding the moisture, they can also attract mosses and attract ferns and attract living materials. So we could have curtains that are actually billowing in the wind, but that are also a garden, possibly, and shading a building at the same time. So more and more, the city is seen, well, you know it because prey birds already use our buildings, but this is really an important sketch that says, okay, a city is no longer a separate thing from nature or wilderness, but it's nature itself. It's like a group of mountains. So more and more, we work with architects and also with clients and municipalities and the European Union that says a building is not just a building, it's also a home for life. And it's like a garden, it starts at the ground and it goes up and becomes, has these different conditions. So we also work with, in Switzerland, on an elderly home where it's a bit like the blue areas or the blue zones, excuse me, the blue zones that you, instead of going to Sardinia or Japan to find these blue zones, you create now buildings that are in themselves, hopefully, blue zones where you need to walk and climb, but also that you have natural conditions that change from the bottom up. And of course, it's all connected to engineering and architecture, because you can carry more weight in the lower levels than on top. So here you see it would go from moist and very rich until many different conditions going up. So how do you create in a very natural and instinctive way, when you live there, a very healthy way of living? And so, as said, this is a sketch by an architect we worked with. The municipality of Amsterdam literally asked for a nature-inclusive building. And so what you do is not any longer design as much as you create conditions, and these conditions attract nature. So your site is somewhere, and you build something that attracts the nature, whether animals or plants, that are already in this climate in the neighborhood. And it's hugely interesting to work on, and we have a lot of collaborations, of course, with biologists and ecologists. So here you see these different biotopes that you could create. And of course, this whole collaboration with architecture is very intimate and very necessary to, from the beginning, create these possibilities. And I don't need to tell you that even the facades are being worked on with special kinds of cement or mud or even very designed structures, so that the facades themselves are like the curtain we are trying to develop, absorbing moisture and absorbing life, and even creating nest possibilities. And so this is the kind of presentations we have. Like, okay, we are creating these biotopes, and within a few years you might have all these animals, and again introduce the bees that have left, and introduce all the plants that are naturally here, local plants that we lost, and that might come back, or maybe we play a bit of a false game. And these are schemes we make that each season has flowering plants, shrubs, trees, so that each season insects and animals can feed on what is growing on and around a building. So it's a bit like Humboldt system, where you really imitate these conditions with shade, with sun, with wind, and so on, and that you create this kind of buildings. They are half modern buildings, half complete wilderness, basically. And so my fear is, but that's a personal fear, that it might start to look like this. And the question is it what people want? Is it what people are ready for? And can you isolate this wilderness from the interior? Or is it something that you open the window and everything comes in, you know? Bats and birds and insects and viruses and allergies, maybe? So it's a big question, because many, many years ago, we did everything to shut out wilderness, and now we are introducing wilderness into our close and urban condition. Big question, is this really where we're going to? Well, we have already wolves in Amsterdam, so I'm very optimistic. Jana. Up to you.
So I'm going to follow up on a few more issues and going deeper, literally, into the underground. So we are starting with soil life, because what you heard Petra talking about was biodiversity. Many, oops, what happened? Many people are busy with introducing biodiversity in the city, but how do you actually do that in a way that it's also robust and natural, and where does it actually come from? So we started at a certain point looking at the underground because there's so much going on. On the right side, the infrastructure underground takes up more and more space, needs to be maintained, needs to be changed, etc. And it's sort of blocking also the way for the soil, for the full soil in the city, together with all the buildings. And looking at the soil and actually what does it mean, soil, we found very many interesting people to work with here. One of our important advisors, an expert on worms, who started, explaining to us, but also to our clients, the importance of soil. Because if you think about soil, or maybe you know that already, in a handful of vital soil, there are so many organisms as people on Earth. So that is just a mind-blowing number that you think like the soil is actually an ecosystem. It's not just brown matter. But when you say ecosystem, it consists of animals, creatures, organisms that we don't find attractive. We find them disgusting most of the time. So we started looking at images that actually explain what is happening underground, what's living underground. And when we were looking for images, they were mostly diagrams, schematic, so they explained it very interestingly, but they didn't give us a real feeling. How does it actually look like underground? What's going on? How does it interconnect with each other? So we started on a quest to visualize soil life, because many people are starting to talk about roots, about that everything has to come from the ground, but it's these organisms in the ground that actually make that possible, and we don't know enough about it to really understand it fully and also protect it. This quest about visualizing soil started quite early in certain projects where we are also trying to visualize the battle between infrastructure and roots, but we felt that our drawings about roots were actually lacking. We didn't really know how to draw it, so we started in AutoCAD, most of you know this program, how to draw roots, how do you draw underground? It was really difficult. We have this one book, which is for us like a Bible, which actually explains how roots are growing. Many people who are actually interested in it believe that the crown projection is the same as the root surface, but it's much wider, especially in Amsterdam, where we have a very high groundwater table. So that's where it starts. And we were also looking for the ingredients to draw soil life. We came across these beautiful old school boards that actually explain all these insects in a very graphic way, and came across pictures that actually show you in real time the soil life. This is an image of mycelium in the underground. And now with new techniques, there's even a visualization possible of the energy and the streams and the exchange in the roots, which is very exciting and gives us new possibility to understand what is going on. And then when you zoom in, really zoom in, then you discover the beauty of the underground creatures. These are springtails, some of my favorites. So they are beautiful and we don't know about it. So we as a team in the office, we came together with a white sheet of paper on the table starting to draw, like how do you draw soil life? Of course, we don't know enough, so we invited more people. We invited ecologists, biologists from all kinds of universities who explained it to us and corrected our drawings. we invited them to give lectures about, their specific fields. So this is, for example, Saul, who's in love with springtails and can tell you all about it and how important this little creature is. And if you just take this tiny creature away, then something will be lost. So first sketches started to appear, a sort of collage of all this information, more information about the creatures, and we work towards a drawing that actually collects everything in one drawing. 1 square meter of vital soil in a section, 1-to-1. How do you draw that? And this drawing actually started to contain all these things that we learned, all the things that are going on the surface of the soil, which is a very important part. And it's very fragile because that's the area where we put our pavements in, where we, polluted with all kinds of dirt and garbage. But that's actually the area where most of life is coming together. And soil actually starts above ground because a rotting tree is super important not to be cleared away, but to rot and to feed the soil. And all these organisms will help making this rotting wood into soil. Fungi are decomposing the wood. So we started drawing plant roots and the underground mycorrhiza, this network, but also the worms that are digging the pathways into the underground, which actually allow the water to infiltrate together with the molds, making even bigger pathways to really make this soil porous for water, for air, for all kinds of things that are needed underground. And we also try to visualize the tiniest organisms, microbes, bacteria, nematodes, which are very important to start with, because when we are talking about biodiversity in the city, we often hear just talking about birds and bees and butterflies, but it's actually starting here, because without those, the bigger ones wouldn't have anything to eat. So it's this whole system that we need to understand, and which led us to this image of vital soil, which also shows this very thin crust in the top where everything comes together. It shows the pathways of the worm and the mole, and in white, this mycelium network that actually connects the trees and enables them to survive, especially in the city where sometimes nutrients or water are very far away. And these images started to travel, so we also presented them in different conferences and exhibitions. And you see that we now use our aesthetic feeling, our profession in a way to also visualize this, not only to direct it, to design it, to shape it, but to communicate it. And again, then from that moment on, we, you actually want to dig deeper and say, okay, but how can we actually use that in the city? Because the previous picture was a beautiful drawing, but the reality is not always beautiful or simple. So together with this whole network of scientists, we are growing and growing and growing our network. And this is what we need to do. We need to collaborate. You cannot just, make a garden by yourself these days anymore. You sort of need to find out what's the soil like, what are the conditions, what are the source populations for the ecology. We started also translating our knowledge into AutoCAD drawings, Illustrator drawings, as architects are using them, so that we can apply it in our project, so that we are not longer drawing sections with a sort of black underground hatched in a sort of technical way, but that you see what is happening, and that you also visualize the importance of a compact soil or a bigger soil layer above underground structures. We are structuring our knowledge to also to tell it in a more clear way to other people. Again, share it as much as possible in exhibitions and conferences, and hope that all this knowledge will lead to a better understanding of what we can do about climate change, for example. Because that is like the main thing that drives us all, and I think that's also the reason why we are all here, because we want to understand how we can make a difference for climate change. But this is an interesting diagram which is not by us, but which shows that when you start from climate action alone, so that's the top diagram, the results will not always be in favor of biodiversity. So all the red lines, they lead actually to results that are negative for biodiversity. On the other hand, and that's the diagram below, if you start with actions for biodiversity, it might actually end up very positive for climate change, so climate-proof measurements. And that's an interesting thought, that actually our actions should be based on nature and less on technology, more and more robust in a natural way. So thank you. And then I give it back to Petra.
I think I have a microphone already. Okay, everyone who wants to leave, leave.
No.
I think it's a good idea.
No.
Then we are left with a little concentrated...
No, we haven't shown many projects by the studio, actually. So presenting the book, it's also a way to show it's really to see them in line. It's really impressive because there are really many, and also because many of them were ephemeral. Has to do with not all of the project have been because of installations, also the relation with the world of art. So.
Yeah, I think there was a camera coming to film the book.
Sì, adesso c'è una telecamera inquadrerà.
Ah, he's here.
Eccolo
Hi.
qua.
Hi, welcome
E
to
quindi
this
sarà un modo
crazy,
per rivedere alcuni
crazy
progetti.
undertaking. Okay, I wanted to just tell first how the book came about. Well, this one So anyway, it's an initiative by the ETH in Zurich, so the technical university in Zurich. And I've done this so often, it's a bit torn, but it has an exterior foldable, everything is symbolic for our work, of course, foldable poster-like cover that actually protects the book. And that in itself, in itself is of course a weave. Things go under, text goes over. The back names the title, but also the partners, and also Peter Niesen, who's a partner, not official partner, but he's the fashion designer who works with me already, with us, but we started together 24 years ago or something. The ETH, two curators, Niels Olsen and Freddy Fischli, who work as professors but also as art and architecture historians for the ETH, but also for the Luma Foundation. They initiate exhibitions, they create exhibitions, and they make books. And they first invited our team to work with them on curtains for the gallery, then on an exhibition design for the Luma Foundation. And then they said, wow, your work is incredible, nobody knows it, so let's do an exhibition. Let's do a retrospective exhibition in Zurich, in the Semper building. Well, you know the Semper building, it's like this ugly, enormous mogul of 18-something. And there's an enormous hall in the interior, of course, in the interior, and with columns, very classicistic. And I visited it and I thought, well, if we do a retrospective, either it takes 5 years to organize it or we do something quickly. And so Niels and Freddy agreed, and we quickly made an exhibition consisting of a curtain. Sorry, it's difficult for you to film this. Maybe not film me, but only the book, so that I can... Can you go on top? Great. So we made these enormous curtains, 25 meters long, 12 meters high, 2 of them, creating a false perspective in this classicistic hall, and with a seam on 2 sides of 4 meters high, printed with 70 of our projects. And on the floor, we symbolized the paths of the Biblioteca degli Alberi, because it was 2018 and it was going to open soon, the park. And so then it went to, and Theo Schieferli, the graphic designer, made a folder and also posters, and Niels and Fredi organized talks and lectures and interviews during that 2-week exhibition. The exhibition traveled. It went to the Triennale, where it was much smaller and lower, and of course a curtain is flexible, so you can adjust its size, and then we created a sort of maze that people could go into. And then it traveled to the Maxi Museum with Juan Ru and Pipo Ciora. We created this exterior installation, so the curtain was outside. Here you see it a bit. It was also 12 meters high. A special beam structure was made between Zaha Hadid's concrete volumes, and it was actually really hanging in between Zaha and in the wind, kind of billowing, so people could really walk in between and have that experience.
Zaha, that you knew very well personally.
Well, yes, we met a couple of times, and she makes fantastic buildings. But so the book is actually based on this exhibition, and then Fredi and Niels said, great, we can now make a book, because it's easy. We've already made this, so we can make a book. And we said, yeah, good idea. And it took about 3.5 years to make the book, so not very quickly. With Theo Schieferli, and it's become quite a work. It shows, we counted 421 projects since 1986. Niels and Fredi invited a couple of authors for the book. They wrote themselves an introduction to the book, a very beautiful story. And then it starts with first the list of all our projects from 1986, page, 421 projects, to 2023. And of course it's open because we're not done yet. We're starting, we're halfway, we're mezzo. Mezzo.
Esatto.
Anyway.
A metà strada.
Yes. If you look at the list, you see sometimes a number in the black, and if there's a number, it's actually represented, and you can find it in the book. The pages are in the middle, very difficult to read, but they are there, and then you can find the projects accordingly. What I did while we were working on the book is make a few what we called posters. So through the book, you see a kind of statements in the form of posters. Sometimes it's about what Jana was just talking about, the importance of vital soil. And sometimes it's about a history of something about art and how the world is now being very careful with art pieces. And I took the story of when I was pregnant of my daughter. I worked at the Stedelijk Museum at the Applied Arts Department, and you are then a civil servant at the Stedelijk Museum, and there was no childcare at all. Nothing organized, nothing. And we had 6 weeks of, how do you call that? Holiday, maternity leave, 6 weeks. And then I had 2 weeks of holiday. So my daughter was 8 weeks, and I went back to work. And we made a cradle of a collection panier. And then my boss said, hey, you need to change the nappies of your baby. And where shall we do that? Come on, let's get the Rietveld buffet up. so you can change your daughter's nappies. So my daughter's nappies were literally, for a few months, changed on this Rietveld buffet. And what I'm actually saying with this, imagine this today. It's impossible. And it's actually symbol for the whole way that our society became much and much too, in my view, in our view, a bit too careful. Everything is protected, everyone is taken by the hand, whether you go to a museum, whether you go to a park, everything needs to be short, transparent, safe, no risk, no mystery, no nothing. So it's a criticism on our society. And so you have some of these posters that go through the book. For the rest, what is original in the book is that Niels and Fredi asked us to write memories. So with each new project, if there's a starting project, you always have one page with a memory or a quote or something that has to do with that project. And then underneath you have an explanation what our task was. So it's always telling a story. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's about the context where you are, sometimes it's something. Anyway, it's very personal. And as Jana and Aura became partners in 2016, more and more of these quotes are also by them and by Peter and by Nafsika, people of my team. But the book is going from now backward. So if you start in the back, you see actually how I started. And again, there's a poster, a quote by Angela Davis. I think it really says something about how we like to see the world. You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. Very important for all of us. Anyway, it starts at the dance theater, where I was involved in the interior and made my first stage curtain. And what I'm telling here in this quote, in this story, is how free we were, how unbelievably, completely irresponsible we were. We were working day and night. We made almost everything ourselves. We put the gold leaf on this little small column in the foyer. We put the lights in. We upholstered the furniture. We found a piece of tree and we took it and we made it into a chaise longue for the dancers. And so it was an incredible adventure, this kind of process. And I think that's also very important to tell sometimes to younger generations of architects. The other thing, what I did in that time, and I say I because I still worked freelance and alone, was to co-design all these exhibitions on architecture and design, and also with OMA. And all these exhibitions were actually experiences. So I learned a lot at the Stedelijk Museum. I worked there as a very young woman, and I learned about lighting, about the effect of color, the effect of scale, the effect of sequence. And so I used that in presenting OMA in 1989, 90, 91, 92, in different countries, in different situations, the work of that moment of OMA. And we invited artists to make models. We created tents where dramatic light was in. We put curtains in an exhibition with a wind machine so that the curtain would billow all the time. And it was always about finding a way of creating an environment in which not only the end result of the architect was shown, but actually the mentality of the architect. So what are they inspired by, and what kind of people are they anyway, and how do they come to that final result? And so it's always a storytelling. And sometimes this is a collage I made. There was no computer yet, so we did everything by hand, making collages and creating these rooms and experiences from one to the next, and also for the first time introducing collage as part of the brain the secret brain content of the artist in question. And also creating reproductions of a project that the architect at that moment was actually working on. This is Villa de Lava in Paris, and this exhibition was also in Paris. And so this was then a presentation of what I think this room should look like, and this is then how it really became. So in that sense, foreseeing, and that's part of our work, I think, foreseeing what will be the case. And we had very much fun, because when the building Villa de Lava was done, I called Jean Nouvel and I said, can you be our model in this villa? And he immediately said yes. And he was there all day. He came with a black cape, like a kind of dramatic. And he stayed all day, and we made this whole series.
Like a vampire, you mean?
Yeah, we had great fun. Another thing I introduced was opening up, and that was very much what we do all the time, this connection between outside and inside. So this was a gallery in Barcelona, the Col·legi d'Arquitectes de Catalunya, and here this was open and this was closed, but we opened it to the outside world and we closed the offices and we made a wall and we made this kind of topography. And so we created this chance encounter between people who were shopping in the shopping street and this architectural show. And what we also did was put a very big lamp on the other side of the street, sponsored by Philips, a Dutch company. And this lamp was really shining in and actually lighting up everything in the gallery. So at night, it was like a holy experience. You were walking in this street and you saw this beam of light absolutely pulling you into this wonderful exhibition. So this book is telling a lot of stories and goes on and on and on. Also telling about an experience I had by working with an anthroposophic gardener to learn gardening for a couple of years. Anthroposophic means she believed in Rudolf Steiner's system, so we were gardening according to the moon. And I learned a lot from that. Part of what I learned was, of course, how plants and roots collaborate, how if you make a nursery or if you make a garden, which plants and vegetables and herbs should be put together so that they are more strong. And so all the learning, and I think that Inside Outside is still about learning. What was really nice to work with Fredi and Niels and Theo, the graphic designer, was that we always worked together on this book. And so we had a very, you know, if you have almost 40 years of work, you have an enormous archive. It's not all digital, you know, it's boxes and slides and negatives and all kinds of things. And so to select, to really say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, let's keep it simple, only 1 page, 2 page, was like a sport. And it was an incredibly creative way of collaborating. So I hope you will enjoy the book. And I'm here, and Jana is here to sign it. It weighs 1 kilo and 8. It has almost 900 pages. What else should I tell? Oh, and the publisher is Mac Books.
Maybe a precision on the title, Applied Arts, because before when I asked, when I said Le Corbusier preferred decorative arts, you did...
Decorative art.
In fact, it was polemic
Yes,
at his age. It's a book published in 1925, because, you know, on L'Esprit Nouveau,
Yeah.
he had 3 columns, one of architecture, and with that text did Verso una Architecture, one of urbanism, and did another book, and one about the decorative arts, which
Very
he
important.
preferred to applied arts.
Yeah.
And so ecco, why you choose the contrary of Le Corbusier, the definition of applied arts? Because it's the most synthetic possibility for all your activity.
Hi. Applied arts, it's funny because Niels and Fredi asked, actually, when we had this exhibition in Zurich, they asked Rem Koolhaas to do a lecture about Inside Outside and about me and Inside Outside.
Which is present in the book.
And he introduced applied art because he says it's not design, because you're not designing products, you're not designing anything. They're all unique pieces or unique installations or unique environments, all reacting to the context, reacting to the built or the unbuilt or whatever.
In fact, Joe Ponti has this idea. Also, he never used the word design. He founded a department called Architettura di Interni, but who included these unique pieces for the house, including tent, carpets, etc. So it was a word much beyond design.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for
so hence applied
explication.
Art.
Yes.
But we took a long time to
decide.
To decide, yeah. It's very difficult, title
But
of the book.
because
you
it's
know
a very
about it.
various. The nature of your work is so, I would say, heterogeneous.
Okay.
For the library of the National Institute of Architecture.
Oh, fantastic. But what should, just a signature, I suppose, yeah. Anyone else? Shall I put the date? Yeah, and Jana? Yes. Manuel?
Sì.
Thanks. And your daughter?
Grazie.
Manuel, who else? Manuel and?
Federica.
Federica.
Yes, perfect.
With a K? C?
No,
C?
sì.
Yes. What's your name? Barbara. To Barbara.